Have you ever wondered what a mix between Fortnite and GTA would look like? Or perhaps Portal and Among Us? No? Okay, well I have. And that is the exact reason why today I'll try to mix 7 of the most popular games of all time into one. The rules are simple. I'll implement at least one mechanic or feature from each of the 7 games, and at the end I'll hopefully have a game worthy of my satisfaction. Let's just get straight into it. Okay, let's reveal the first game. Undertale. Okay, so for this one I didn't feel like I had much to choose from. Maybe the combat system, which is quite unique and realistically really hard to build upon, or some cool characters like Sans or Papyrus, but eventually I settled on stealing the movement. I know, choosing walking as the main mechanic is like ordering plain toast at a buffet, but we need to start somewhere. So I began the project and started by copying every pixel art for the main character, which turned out to be really tedious as I had to do it all manually. Eventually I reached the point where I had every variation of sprites available, so I just had to mix and match them all to simulate movement. It did also require constructing this spiderweb of different situations, but I think the result looks pretty decent. And if we compare it to the original, it isn't actually all that bad in my opinion. Anyway, I also tried to add some Undertale backgrounds, but apparently I'm a dumbass when it comes to tile maps because I simply couldn't get it to work properly. So yeah, this is all from the Undertale part, but don't you worry, I promise you this game will either end up way cooler than anything I've ever made before, or it'll collapse under its own ambition like my New Year's resolutions. Okay, on to game 2. Let's reveal the game. Celeste. Okay, so this one's a bit more interesting, as Celeste has various cool mechanics, such as wall climbing and moving obstacles. But I think the obvious pick is the dash. I mean, the dash from Celeste is just awesome, and there is no doubt that it is the perfect choice. So I began by adding the dash itself as just, faster speed in a specific direction. But it instantly felt about as interesting as the British food palette. And that's because a dash isn't just about the speed you gain, it's about how it feels. I mean, just listen to this dash from Celeste. So it's obvious that what I need is to copy it to the best of my ability. I started with the trail effect. I made work by spawning separate blue translucent still frames behind the player, and honestly I quite like the effect, but it's far from enough. Next, I added the screen shake quite easily, followed by 3 different dash sound effects, and now the dash feels like this. Pretty cool, I'd say. I decided that I had some extra time left over, so I made a camera movement similar to the one in Celeste. And that's it for game 2. So on to the third game. And for the reveal, Assassin's Creed. So this time I decided to implement 2 things. The first is daggers, because as far as I know, most Assassin's Creed games use daggers in some way, shape or form. I decided that the player would have 2 different attacks with the daggers, the first one being a throw. Honestly, pretty simple to add. It was kinda boring to throw daggers at the wall though, so I made this temporary enemy to act as a dummy and made sure that the throw would feel nice. The second attack was a slash, and this one was a bit harder to add. My solution was to make the slash a separate prefab and just spawn it in at the location I want. The second thing I decided to add was a stealth system. I mean, come on, I have to add a stealth system when it's Assassin's Creed. Anything else would be cheating. I simply made the enemies detect when the player entered the detection zone and do nothing. Hopefully I'll fix that later, but for now I decided to focus on switching the enemy's state. When the detection zone is triggered, the enemy locks onto the player, and if it ever loses sight of you, it stalks your last seen location like a desperate X. When it reaches this location, it stops for a second and then just gives up. Finally, after making this work, I made some very simple pathfinding. And that's basically it for game 3. So let's move on to game number 4. Okay, let's just reveal the game. Portal. Okay, from this one I decided to add the cubes. Okay, I'll do it. I'll add the portals. I really wanted the portals to be as similar to the ones from Portal as possible, but for obvious reasons, making seamless portals isn't really part of my arsenal. Despite of this, these non-seamless portals were actually pretty easy to add. The hard part was the obstacle that came next. A big part of what makes Portal such a cool experience is the portal gun. The ability to place the portals anywhere you want is exactly what my game needs. But little did I know how much pain I was about to go through. It turns out that moving the portals isn't actually that hard to pull off, but rotating them properly is a pain in the ass. Of course, the portals have to rotate to fit on any surface, and the objects shot through have to rotate accordingly. And after a lot, and I mean a lot of different attempts to make this work, we eventually figured it out in a way that doesn't look too bad. After adding some animations to the portals and of course the cubes, game 4 is done. So let's move straight to game 5. Okay, let's just reveal the game. Among Us. Okay, so we have a couple options to pick from. Venting? Nah, portals do pretty much the same thing. The map? Nah, it doesn't really fit. Tasks? Nah, they're too... Oh wait, they're perfect. To make it as simple as possible, I chose the simplest task I knew. The electrical wires. And luckily for me, this nice guy made an entire tutorial series dedicated to remaking things from Among Us. It took some struggle, but eventually everything fit into place. And we now have a working task system. So far, it works like this. Step 1. Walk into the ultra awesome invisible hitbox. Step 2. Press E. Yeah, so... Step 3. Fix the wires. And step 4. Do something else, I guess. Yeah, so except for the fact that it's currently completely pointless, the task system works flawlessly. But there still isn't much game about this project, so hopefully I'll figure out something to fix this for the next game. Okay, let's reveal the game. GTA 5. For this one I again had a bunch of choices. I could choose the smarter NPCs, but that's too much work. The map? No chance. The weapon system? Nah. Okay, I think we get it. The features and mechanics are simply too advanced for my underdeveloped frontal lobe to just add in a couple days, so I'll have to scale them down a bit. I decided on adding two things again. The first being shooting, specifically enemies shooting. At the moment, the enemies don't really have any way of attacking or dealing with the player, so I think this is perfect. So I modified the scripts a bit and made this cool circle with a trail, and now we have shooting. But it still doesn't affect the player, so let's fix that too. I gave the player some health and made it flash red when hit by a bullet. And that's basically it for the bullet. But next, for the second feature, I chose the wanted system. When the player walks into any enemy's detection area, every enemy visible to the camera will get the info on where the player is and start attacking. This means that an enemy outside the field of view will not be affected by this. Secondly, every camera location will have a secondary location where enemies spawn. So when the player is caught, a specified number of enemies dependent on the spawn location will spawn. And that's it for game 6. So it's time to move on to the final game. Let's just reveal the game. Five Nights at Freddy's. Okay, so this one's interesting. Since the game currently is just a mixture of way too many independent features held together by my hopes and dreams, the game needs something to tie everything together. And I think the only thing that could do that at the moment is level design. I changed the tile set to something more FNAF-like and started the map design. I ended up making 8 different rooms, each with its own purpose of showing off a different mechanic. At this point, the game was finished. At least to some degree, but there wasn't really any point to finishing it, so I added a speedrun timer to give the game some purpose. And that's basically it. The game is done. Alright, what do we actually have here? Is it a platformer? A puzzle game? Something else? Honestly, I have no clue. It's not balanced, it's barely playable, but it exists, and that's a win in my book. Could a 10-year-old remake this better in Roblox? Probably. If you watched this far, consider subscribing, and thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.